Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Happy Head podcast. My guest today is the fabulous Rayna Rose. Hi, Rayna. Well, two things. I love your hat, love your outfit, and love all the artwork behind you.
You're amazing, Paul. Thank you so much for having me on the show. You know, the beauty of these Zoom calls is you should have seen what I looked like 10 minutes before the call.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I get it. And also, I mean, you're on the other side of the world, not quite on the other side of the world, but almost. You're in sunny Florida. I'm
Yeah.
in grey, wet, miserable Folkestone, which is about 70 miles southeast of London in the UK.
You know, I had no idea the situation of lack of sun in England until I was living abroad in Israel with British people when I was 18 years old. And Paul, it didn't matter how cold it was, anytime the sun came out, the British people were like immediately putting on bikinis, laying out. So I'm so grateful that I live in the sunny state of South Florida where people take that 1 year of vacation. I get to live that life every single day.
Yeah, I stopped wearing my bikini a long time ago. But it's true. I mean, here in the UK, if you get over about 14 or 15 degrees, which I'm guessing is about 30, 35 Fahrenheit, so not much more than that. Yeah,
Mhm.
all the clothes come off and it's a heat wave.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. And you know, now as an adult living in a state where it's always sunny, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and we have summer, but fall and winter, it's like very gray and kind of dark and cold. And growing up, I definitely was sadder because of that. And I'm just so appreciative that I have the gift of sunshine every day. Because even if I have the worst day ever, I have to smile because the sun is shining.
Yeah, in the UK and other parts of Europe, SAD, seasonally
Hmm.
affected disorder, is a thing because we just don't get that much sunlight in the winter. God knows what it's like for people that live in Scandinavia, where they have probably less than half the sunlight we have in the UK.
I can't imagine.
So, listen, tell us about Rayna. Who is Rayna? Why are you on the show today? Tell me your
Totally.
story.
Yeah, my name is Rayna Rose Exelbierd. I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Although I've lived in Palm Beach County so long that everybody assumes I'm from New York. We have a running joke that Palm Beach County is the sixth borough of New York City because there are so many New Yorkers who live in my community. And COVID really challenged me to redesign my business and redesign my life. A year and a half ago, I left the nonprofit world to launch my own business. Um, and it was such a struggle, it was such a journey. And finally, that February, right before COVID hit, I had really thought I had made it in my business because I was so focused on being a speaker. That was going to be all that I did was speak for a living. Um, but when those events got canceled, everything changed. I was like, you know what? Get a full time job. You fucking tried, like give up, but there were no full time jobs available. So that really challenged me to be like, okay, what can I do with where I'm at now? And first, it started with let me just post, every single day. To fast forward to right now, I'm now making more money than I ever was before. Speaking is like the smallest part of my business. And don't get me wrong, I love having the opportunity to speak. But within COVID, I was inspired to write a children's book from the loss of my father. I'm almost at 20,000 sales in that. I was
Wow.
inspired, yeah, to start a teen mentorship program where I can empower teens collectively to take some of these tools that I had to use to grow as a person in the last year. And from there, mentoring students one on one around the world. I used to mentor only Jewish students. So the fact that I'm now mentoring students, the majority of them who aren't Jewish, it just shows me that I was playing so small and that before COVID, I cared more about keeping my word to other people than I did myself. And once I put myself first, everything in my life changed professionally and personally.
Coming back a little step there, what were you doing in the non-profits world? What was your thing in that kind of line?
Yeah, so it's so funny that I ended up working for a nonprofit because I studied international business in college. And my whole vision growing up was that I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to inspire people, I'm going to travel the world. And when I'm done being this big, successful businesswoman, then I'm going to go into politics. And between high school and college, I was inspired to spend a year abroad in Israel, where I did all kinds of activities that really brought me outside of my comfort zone, volunteering in the Israeli army, doing archaeological digging, really finding myself as a woman for the first time in my life. And after living abroad, I moved to Boca Raton to go to college. And people are always so shocked to hear this, that Boca Raton, the city where my university was, has more Jews in one city, the entire state of Tennessee, which is where I grew up. And the reason that I mention that is because growing up as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors in Memphis, Tennessee, I never experienced racism. I never experienced, anti-Semitism. I grew up with friends of, all different backgrounds. In fact, I grew up in a city that was the majority was black, and the mayor was black, and many of my teachers growing up, were from all different backgrounds. But if you can believe this, it wasn't until I was 18 going to college in this super Jewish city that for the first time in my life, I experienced anti Semitism, I experienced Holocaust denial. And it was through overcoming those challenges, being cyberbullied, being told, again, that the Holocaust never happened, having a fake eviction notice put on my dorm, all sorts of things. These challenges were the catalysts that inspired me to get educated. Because even though my grandparents survived the Holocaust, I didn't actually know their story. I lived in Israel. I didn't actually know where Israel was on a map. And sometimes, like COVID, until we get that pressure, that fire, we're not actually going to learn or connect the dots until we're forced to. So that empowered me to get educated. That gave me the opportunity to travel around the country. That gave me opportunities to speak to people. And by embracing my own story, not only did it motivate me forward, but it gave me the opportunity to create a movement where I was able to carry all these other leaders with me. And when I graduated with the business degree in 2015, because of all my involvement in college, all these different nonprofits had opportunities for me to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on to work as a motivational speaker and mentor for an Israel education organization, where for 4 years I worked in 6 states. And my role was teaching students how to organize events, teaching teenagers how to combat anti-Semitism. And the reason I was so successful as a mentor and still am today is because I made so many mistakes as a college leader, right? And a big part of leadership is not only owning your mistakes, but creating environments where people feel comfortable sharing those mistakes. So even though I stepped into a brand new region at my company, um, after just a year, me and my kids ended up being more than 30% of the entire department's outreach for the rest of my time at that company. And I was very limited in where I could speak. And the more that I spoke, I realized I had so many lessons and connections that I wanted to share with the teens. And that's why I decided to leave the nonprofit world and launch my own speaking and mentorship business, The Rose Grows.
Wow. There's one thing I cannot understand about Holocaust deniers. I mean, okay, there are certain conspiracy theories that I understand. Who shot JFK? Nobody knows. Nobody will ever know.
Right,
But yes, he was shot, and somebody shot him.
right.
The story is the who and the why. But the Holocaust, I mean, I lived for a while in central London in a place called Golders Green, which is a very Jewish community, got both Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews. And I was
Mhm.
very friendly with a lady called Edith Cross. Me and my girlfriend at the time were both friendly with her. And she was a victim, I guess. She was sent away from Germany just before World War II, just before they kind of like locked the borders. But she lost most of her family to the Holocaust. And there's so much evidence that, it happened and it's
Mhm.
fact. And God knows what, 6 million plus people were exterminated, essentially. I
Right.
do not understand how people can deny that it happened when there is so much proof around and so many people still alive today that
Mhm.
witnessed it in one shape or form.
Exactly. And I think the biggest part of the problem with Holocaust denial today in modern time is the internet. The internet is a tool that should be used for good.
Mm.
I love a year ago, Sasha Baron Cohen. It was the first time for the Happy Head podcast listeners. Sasha Baron Cohen is the actor who plays Borat, and for the first time in 20 years, he spoke out and said, if somebody were to walk into a restaurant and scream the N word or to scream kike, which is a derogatory term towards Jews, the business owner has the right to throw that person out of the restaurant. And everybody in the restaurant would be grateful for that yelling person to be out. And the point that Sasha Baron Cohen makes is that there's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of reach. And that imagine if Hitler had access to Facebook ads, then perhaps his message could have been blasted all over the world. And fortunately, since he made that speech, actually, very recently, Facebook did come out and say we are going to crack down on Holocaust denial posts. But that's I think is a good place to start. But also the devil advocates, as some people say, well, if you start censoring, information, about the Holocaust, then where do you draw the line in terms of what topics and what matters that you decide to censor, which we've seen a lot of those challenges recently with elections and politicians all over the world.
No, absolutely. I don't think it's an issue. Fake news, fake information is simply that. And
Yeah.
I believe that the social media platforms are duty bound to, okay, you're not going to be able to eliminate it completely, I don't think, but at least to put a stamp on it and to close it down as much as possible. I mean, God, if they can shut down Donald Trump's when he was, or he's still technically president, when he was president, then they should be able to shut down, the Joe blogs that issues crap, which everybody knows is fake. It's
Right.
just,
And I think anyone who promotes hate or violence, we've also seen around the world where social media has been used as a tool to riot and to create violence. And part of the responsibility is on the platforms, but I also think part of the responsibility is on the users to not engage those people, but certainly report those things when you see them.
yeah, unfortunately, human beings are attracted to negativity and negative news and this kind of. I mean, look at TV news, even before the internet.
Yeah.
TV news was always bad news. Maybe if you're lucky, the channel would have like a 30-second slot at the end with the funny story, the cows
Oh
that
yeah.
escaped into town or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always joke that the last story of the news I like to watch here in America, it's the end of the news because it's always puppies, children, military, or future.
Yes,
That's it.
yeah, always the same
Yeah.
kind of thing. So, what made you decide to leave the non-profits world and step out on your own? What
Yeah,
was the motivating factor for you to sort of take that route?
totally. So I've always been like very confident when it comes to sort of my skills and my gifts. And the last thing that my father ever heard me say, which was at the end of my third year at the nonprofit, was, I know this is really premature and like I have to figure it out. If I have to become a spin instructor, I'll do it, but like I need to start my own thing and like I need to leave, right? And then over the next year of, grieving my dad and traveling and thinking and reflecting, um one of the stories my dad, I've actually never shared this on a podcast. It's kind of cool. One of the stories my dad used to share with me is at one point in his career, he was working for a man named Kimmons Wilsons, who was one of the founders of the Holiday Inn. And essentially he kind of had this conversation with my dad of like, how long are you going to work for me? Like, when are you going to start like your own thing? And, obviously there's a lot more like details to the story,
Sure.
but, you know, being 26 years old, thinking about that lesson that I'd always like really, really appreciated hearing from my dad. I finally like realized at the end of that fourth year, my dad used to always say, shit or get off the pot, right? And I was just like, if I don't leave now, I'm going to be here for definitely another year because I work with teenagers. And even though there were other people who might have left in the middle of the year for other opportunities, it's a yearly cycle. I can't give up on my kids. And I remember even talking to my mom about it because there were some kids I still wanted to mentor. I kind of was like, do I leave now or do I stay? I really want these kids. And my mom was like, when are you going to make a decision based off of what you want and not what the kids want? And that's when I was kind of like, all right. So I saved some money and it definitely wasn't enough because, like, 2 months into me being on my own, you have to imagine I left this very cushy job where, starting out of college, I made 40 grand a year. And by this point, I'd gotten a nice raise every single year. So anything I wanted to do, I could do. Fortunately, my parents paid for college and paid for my car. So in my mind, I had no debt. I should just spend all the money,
Mm.
that I'm making. But when you're unemployed and not making money, all of a sudden you're like, thank God I bought that camera when I had a salary. Thank God I bought that laptop, when I had money. Like, thank God my parents bought me my car because if I had this stupid Mercedes Benz that I was paying a note on, it would be, do you want to eat or do you want to drive in style? And I'm not going to lie, 2 months into me going out on my own, I had this huge identity crisis because on the outside, everyone's like, wow, Rayna's so successful. She's an entrepreneur. We could be doing what you're doing. And meanwhile, on the inside, I'm feeling like a loser because, when you're 27 and you put entrepreneur on Instagram, all of a sudden all the young people are like, wow, that's so cool. And I'm like, dude, did you ever think to ask, are you an entrepreneur who makes money? Right. So I felt like this big fraud because my mom was having to supplement my income. I left this job where I was constantly traveling and was the number one person in my department to sitting on my couch with my cat, not knowing, what to do. And honestly, at one point being like, who do you think you are that you could leave that and that you could start something new and be successful at it? Like, what makes you think that you could be so successful at more than one thing? So I had to go through this journey of, I really used to identify myself as I'm a speaker and I'm a mentor. That's how I defined myself, Paul. But when those things were gone, I was like, who the fuck am I? Like, who am I? And that's when I had to realize like who I am is I'm kind, I'm authentic, I'm funny, I'm inspirational. And part of being an entrepreneur is taking on different side hustles. So it doesn't matter if I'm selling beer in the liquor store, I'm babysitting a friend of mine who's special needs, working for an attorney, speaking on stage, or mentoring a student. That's how I authentically show up to all those places because I'm not defined by what I do. I'm defined by who I am and how I treat people. So that was like the first part of the journey of like the healing that I didn't realize like that I needed as a woman and as an entrepreneur.
So are you totally financially independent from your family now?
Now, yes, but it wasn't until deep into COVID. And at the beginning of my journey, I was like, I'm a speaker. So I'm just gonna contact people and be like, hey, hire me to speak, which the best way that I can compare it is the speaker business is like the house business, right? You can drive by and think a house is spectacular. But if you don't have the budget or you ain't ready to move, it don't matter how nice or how ugly the house is, right? So first of all, you cannot make money only being a speaker, especially if you're like just starting out. So at the beginning, I was like getting all this rejection, people being like, you were free, why are we going to pay you? Why do we need you? We hear these topics. So also hearing people tell you no, even though when you're incredible. that brings you down. So I started working with some of my other friends who have thousands of followers and they've published books and they've done TED Talks. And I started booking speaking engagements for them. And what was crazy was when I booked one of my friends who's 20 years old a $10,000 speaking engagement, I had
Wow.
this out of body experience where I'm like, dude, you used to argue with people for $100 in the nonprofit world. You mean to tell me there are people out there who will pay 10 grand for somebody 10 years younger than me? Like, where, so at first, if you would have said, Raina, do you want to be the speaker or you want to be the agent? I'd be like, I'm a millennial. I'm the youngest. I'm obsessed with myself. Of course, I want to be the speaker. But what I realized working with other speakers was I love being the hype woman. I love being a connector and being able to leverage my relationship building skills in those environments. I was able to learn about corporate social responsibility. And as I grow in my career, all those friendships and relationships that I've made along the way are only going to continue to propel me towards, whatever is intended for me.
I've got to ask the question, what topic or what subject was this 20-year-old talking about that was worth 10 grand? Because, like you say, most places won't pay you a dollar unless you're really famous and you've written a load of books and all the rest of it.
Yeah. So he has over 200,000 followers. He's written a book. He's spoken at Facebook and a lot of major companies and organizations. And his talk is all about um, mental health, overcoming suicide, recognizing that sometimes what's some people might say is messed up about us, if leveraged properly, is actually our superpower.
Mhm.
And I'm just so grateful to have him as a friend, but also to have him as a partner because, like I said earlier, I was playing so small in my business because the way that I was applying my strategy to my business was what I knew in the nonprofit world. What I knew from the nonprofit world was go to organizations and pitch yourself as a speaker. That's all I knew. And once I finally got out of that and started playing at all of these new territories, I started building relationships and creating opportunities that I would have never imagined for myself. And honestly, like where I'm at professionally now, had COVID not happened, I think it would have taken me at least 3 years to get to where I am, not just financially, but also emotionally as a human, because this last year and a half has literally been an up and down
Mm.
roller coaster of everything.
But also, I'm guessing that if COVID hadn't happened, you would have gone down a completely different route in that you may well still be chasing that elusive speaker gig where they paid you $10.
Yeah.
Instead, you're getting people booked for 10 grand to speak. So it's
Yeah.
like a whole new pathways opened up for you.
Yeah. And just recognizing that when one grows, we all grow. I could say the biggest thing that I learned from the last year, and for the happy head listeners, if you're in a moment where you don't know what you're doing or what to do, number one, my mentor Pam says this all the time. She says, sometimes God just wants you to get out of bed. That's number one. You got to get out of bed. Number two, put yourself in places where you're going to meet people and network, even if you don't like have a direct like connection, to what's going on. Putting yourself in environments to meet people, you never know how that'll change. For example, yesterday I was on the phone with one of my friends who's a Holocaust survivor. And by the way, I have to say, I started crying when she called me because the last couple times I've spoken to her, she didn't really sound so hot on the phone and she's got vertigo. I called her yesterday to wish her a mazel tov, a congratulations, because I found out she just had a great granddaughter. And I was bawling on the phone because I don't remember the last time I heard her sound so incredible on the phone. And the reason I bring up this story now is because I said to Genya yesterday, I said, I just want you to know I'm so appreciative to you and your boyfriend, Jerry, because, over the last year, before COVID, me spending time with you, there were days that I was sad. And when I was around you guys, taking you out and being with you, not only made me feel better, but my mentor, who's 51 and now my best friend, Pam, the only reason I met Pam was because I took these two Holocaust survivors to an event, right? I didn't know that day that I was going to meet Pam and all these amazing things were going to happen. I just knew that I had nothing else going on in my schedule, but this was something that I could create, right? So sometimes in life, we have to actually create circumstances to make ourselves happy. And a
Mm.
lot of times those steps are not enjoyable. But when we look back on our life, we don't remember, oh, I drove 40 minutes to do that nice thing. We don't remember, oh, I paid $20. I didn't have to do that nice thing. We don't remember that part. We remember the good parts.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. I'm doing it for two reasons, three reasons. First of all, I get to meet great people and hear some fabulous stories like your own. Secondly, there's a lesson in there for at least one or two or three people that are either going to be watching or listening to the podcast.
Mhm.
And thirdly, this presents an opportunity in that I get to know you, you get to know me, and but also somebody watching this or listening to this might go, Rayna or Paul or vice versa. I want to talk to them about X, Y, and Z. And it might not happen tomorrow. It might happen in a year, 5 years, 10 years. You just never know. I mean,
Yeah,
podcasts and are just one of those
right.
assets that
Yeah.
once it's done, it's there. It's always there.
Totally. And like, I've always considered myself, the name of my book is The Girl Who Said Hello to Everyone. I've always considered myself a very powerful connector, but holy shit, networking online during COVID. Like, first of all, you and I would have never met had it not been COVID. And it's just the amount of powerhouse men and
Mm.
women who I've become and network with. Don't get me wrong, I love my friends, but it's the friends who I've made online who've enabled me to keep posting every day and to keep hustling. When we started COVID, I had like I think 300 followers on the Rose Grows Instagram, and now I have 2,000. Like before
Wow.
COVID, I used to pay somebody to make videos for me, and they were fancy and they were expensive. But when COVID hit, I was like, dude, you got to figure out how to make videos. You got to start posting them. And my videos are certainly not perfect. There's way better ones on the internet. But when you start doing something and you're proud of it, you start attracting other people's
Mm.
attention. Now people pay me $150 to make them videos. Like, sometimes we place these self-limiting beliefs. Like mine was, I can't make videos. And it's like, well, look at you now.
I think we are full of limiting beliefs. But I've got a question for you. Going back when you were 18, you went to Israel to do
Mhm.
some, and you ended up volunteering in the army. Now you're a U.S. citizen, I take
Yes.
it, yeah? How the hell does a foreigner
Yeah.
join an army from another country?
Yeah.
It's weird.
So, firstly, anyone from any background all over the world can volunteer in the Israeli army. They have different types of programs. But for me, what was really cool is the programs that I chose, my commanders in the army, they were actual soldiers, but what they chose as their duty was education, right?
Hmm.
So by joining the army, for the first month, I lived on a base called Tel Shomer, which is sort of like the medical base that supplied all the other army bases in Israel. There, we did things like, sort through expired medical supplies, actually pack the combat medic bags. The coolest thing there were a lot of soldiers who came from broken families, disadvantaged homes, or soldiers who had disabilities. Maybe they had Down syndrome or they were autistic, but this particular base gave them a home and a place to serve. And that's like one of the really coolest things about the Israeli army is, people always think like guns and, what you see on the news, but it's so much more than that. Israel's such a small country. For most Israelis, they don't leave their little small town until they're 18 years old. And by going to the army, it gives them the opportunity to really network, see the country, learn leadership skills. And I don't know who said this, but there was someone who once said the reason that Israel has so many companies, tech companies and businesses, is because the nerds, the introverts, are forced to go to the military. They're forced to learn what it means to work in a team. And for many Israelis, if you don't go to the army, you're not going to get a job when you get out. Not just because you don't have a personal connection, but because not going to the army is not seen as a as a very positive thing in Israel. And it was funny because as a foreigner, when I would meet Israelis and be like, "Hey, I'm volunteering in the army," they'd be like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And then I'd be like, "So I'm actually doing a program where I paid to volunteer in the army," and they're like, "Are you joking me? Like, why would you do that?" And then after Tel Shomer, for the next 2 months, I was living on a base in the desert, Stabo Care. And there I had a 2 month army program that basically was a condensed version of what every single Israeli does for their first 9 months of
Like
their
basic
military
training.
service. Yeah. And considering that I was living in Israel for a year, I didn't know this at the time, but going into the army, the first 3 months of my year in Israel really enabled me to see the country in a different way and to feel closer as a citizen than as a tourist. Because even something as simple as how people mop the floors when you're walking past the shops, they're learning how to use the squeegee thing in the army. So it's for me, it changed my life. And certainly I used to have really, really bad anger issues, and they woke me up in the middle of the night the first week in the military, and that took care of that real quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that for Israelis, going to the military at age 18 is a bit like going to college or university anywhere else, because for a lot of people, that is their first real time, apart from say vacations, where they're away from the home for a
Exactly.
substantial period of time, and they're mixing and meeting a whole new group of people. And it's kind of then that your eyes get open to the fact that wow, there are different views, there
Right.
are different people, there are different ideas, thoughts,
Right.
and places. And
Right.
it does kind of like open your mind to a whole new
Yeah.
world.
And when you put on that uniform, nobody cares who your mommy or daddy is. Nobody cares what car you drive or how much money your family has or how bad you were as a high school student. My good friend Barack was a borderline delinquent as a teenager. And I was actually messaging him 2 weeks ago. I think he's putting another 8 years into the army. Like he's actually becoming a career. I don't know his exact position, but he's been in the military now, like I think almost 10 years. And
Mhm.
and they're the ones who are paying for his engineering degree, to go to college. So, the cool thing about the army is, again, it doesn't matter about how great you were as a child or how bad you were as a child, but what you put in ultimately is what you're going to get out. And
That's it.
the
It's,
good
it's who
thing
you
he
are
said,
now. Who
mhm,
you
and
are
the
now,
good thing
what are
he
you
said
doing
about
now, and
business,
your past doesn't kind of count. It's a bit like I've had friends who served in the French Foreign Legion, the this branch of the French army, which is only for foreigners,
mm,
and it brings sort of people from all over the world, all different backgrounds. But the day you sign on the dotted line, you are no longer a Brit or a Canadian or a Czech or a Russian.
wow,
You are a member of the French Foreign Legion. And the idea is that your kind of past stays in the past, and you bond with these people from all over the world into
that's
this,
amazing.
almost unique, probably the uniquest unit in the world.
That's amazing. And I think that's like also a metaphor that we can take to live our lives. We're starting out a brand new year. For the happy head listeners, if there's any advice that I can give you, it's you know let go of the past. It's a new year, it's a new page, it's a new chapter. As long as you're aware of what you don't want, then you have the power to make a choice. And you have two choices. The choice is I can continue doing what's not working for me, or choice number two is I can do something different. And many times making that one small change will actually make the biggest impact, right? I think with these resolutions where people go wrong, they try to change 20 things in the first week. And it's like, you're going to burn out, you know? Start with one thing. You're going to be perfect with it some days. Some days you're going to totally miss it. Start with one thing. And then when that one thing becomes routine, then move on to the next thing. We have 12 months. Nobody says you have to get in shape, read 50 books, travel the world, blah, 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 all by fucking January 31st. Nobody.
So, what do the next 12 months hold for Rayna?
Wow. So the next 12 months for Rayna is, it's funny. I thought my word for 2021 was going to be routine. My word for 2020 was consistency, because I knew if I was consistent with what I needed to do, I would generate, great results. Reflecting back at this year, I can see what happens when I'm inconsistent. So definitely, want to try to be more consistent in 2021. But originally I was thinking routine, because I think I've gotten to a point where I really know what's serving me and what's not serving me. But recently, when reflecting on just the entire year, this speaker I love named Rachel Hollis, I love her. She's incredible. She does this thing called a calendar audit. Look at your last couple months. Where did you enjoy spending time? Where did you enjoy spending money? And then where did you waste time? And where did you waste money? And that's when I kind of realized that when it came to what I wasted, a lot of that was in my personal relationships. And when I tell people that I don't have a lot of self-worth when it comes to dating men, they're always so shocked, because I've spoken over 100,000 people. I'm confident, I'm outspoken, I wear two different color shoes. Like, I don't give a shit, right? But for whatever reason, when it comes to my dating life, I still have a lot of work to do. And when I realized the money wasted and the time wasted, it was all because of me not having the self-worth that I need to have. And my name in Spanish means queen. So, I've really decided for 2021, my word is queen. And I need to every day step into the light and see myself the way that other people see me and respect me. And I recognize that if I can really learn this lesson of what it truly means to love myself completely as a woman, then not only will I be able to help more people, but I just realized, like, moving forward, I'm dating myself, I'm dating my family. And if anybody doesn't want to treat me the way that I treat them or better, I'm going to stick up for myself. I'm going to stick up for myself, because I'd rather be respected than liked. And, it's only January 5th. I've already spoken up to a few people, and I think 3 people have already vibrated themselves out of my life. And that's fine, because if people don't lift you up, that toxicity is only going to bring you down. And the queen is not going down. She's only going up. So let's grow, baby.
I love that. I love that. So, what have you got going on right now, Rain? Have you got any projects? What's happening right now in your world?
Yeah, so I just had a very successful Kickstarter campaign, all centered around my book, The Girl Who Said Hello to Everyone. If you ever need help launching a Kickstarter campaign or creating a book, Happy Head listeners, I'd love to encourage you to reach out. This journey has been ridiculous, because even though I started my own business a year and a half ago, it wasn't until I launched the kids book that I was like, oh, I need an LLC. Oh, I need a business bank account. Oh, I need a sales tax number. So it's funny how a child book made me grow up in my business. So where I'm at right now was last week learning how to ship. 2 weeks ago, it was learning how to build my own Shopify website. My biggest part of the project now is, traditionally when people get bar bat mitzvah, They write thank you notes for all the presents. In fact, my Jewish mom was like, unless you write a thank you note, you can't keep the gift, right? Well, I still have 2 boxes of this stationery from my bat mitzvah when I was 12 years old. So right now, what I'm working on for these next 2 weeks is every single person who bought books from me from my Kickstarter, I'm writing them a handwritten note on my bat mitzvah stationery, putting their information into the Shopify so that when I get those 1,000 books, I'm ready to ship them out. And really, kind of outside of mentoring students one on one, which in my mentorship business, I help students network with professionals and fields that they want to study. I help them start podcasts. I help them write books. Outside of the mentoring, I really see February, March, and April as me doing a lot of like online events and initiatives to promote my book. A lot of people, when they bought books, one of the things they opted for was donating a copy. So I'm going to focus on the state of Tennessee and Florida, reaching out to different organizations, nonprofits, libraries, donating the book on behalf of the person, but also seeing if there's something that we can do together. I'm already working on my next book, which will be The Girl Who Wore Two Different Shoes. And part of me just recognizes that building up my network of buyers now, building up my network of community support, a year later when I come out with my next book, I won't have to do a Kickstarter, and I won't have to give a 10% to anybody else.
Yeah, building, expanding it and growing your network of people. Where can people get in touch and buy a book, Rayna?
Yeah, you can go to therosegrows.com, THEROSE grows, GROWS.com. That's my website. On the front page, you can see where it's got a big picture of my book, and it says, click here to buy a copy, and it'll direct you to the site. And if you're interested in learning more about me, wanting to collaborate on projects in the future, I'd like to invite you to reach out to the Rose Grows on any social media platform: LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, maybe Clubhouse by the time you listen to this episode. I'm not sure, but I'd love to chat with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story and hopefully inspire at least one listener in the process.
Okay, don't worry if you didn't write those down. I'll put the links in the show notes. My last question, Rayna, what would you say to anyone, particularly a young person who is in either the non-profits or in the corporate world and is thinking about stepping out on their own? What would you say to her or him?
Yeah, I would say if you're having these thoughts, that's incredible, right? Because like we said earlier, once you're aware, then you have the opportunity to make the choice. The second point I would say, and this is what I do in a lot of my mentoring with the teens, is you need to start building your brand online now. And you need to do that independent of who you work for. You're not always going to work at this company. You're not always going to work at this nonprofit. And, it's funny because I used to be very upset that I didn't put a lot of content of me online speaking when I was in the nonprofit world. The truth is, I was just so busy that any free time I had, I wanted to party, relax, and hang out with friends. And when I was starting to like go out on my own, the lack of content online of who I was definitely was like a barrier, to booking opportunities. And what's really amazing now is, a couple of weeks ago, I was leading a call with a few different teen content creators. And one of them Googled my name, and she's like, oh my God, Raina. She's like, you have like the whole first page of Google here. And, people pay a lot of money to have all the links on the first page of Google when you look them up. And I guess somebody might say, like, there's not very many Rayna Rose Exelbierds in the world, but it just goes to show that, even if you should have started 5 years ago, like me, you can still start in COVID. You can still start today and make a difference. And there's all kinds of strategies to make yourself known online and leverage your strengths. If you're really good at having conversations with people, start a podcast. That podcast can then be used as content on Instagram and on YouTube and all these other places. So my biggest thing would be, you know, record the things that you do and take that one thing and turn it into multiple pieces of content so that you're not constantly in the situation of like, what do I post and how do I promote what I'm doing? And the other thing I would say too is that I think confidence is really courage. When you do something for the first time, it takes courage. But once you've already done something, it really doesn't take courage to do it again. It takes confidence. And you're going to suck at things and you're going to make mistakes, but it's not what happens to us, but how we respond and how we grow as leaders that will truly define who we are and what people will learn from us in that process.
Start now, get perfect later. There's a guy that I follow, a serial entrepreneur here in the UK called Rob Moore, and that's one of his phrases.
Oh, I
Forget
love
about the
that.
fact that you maybe should have started 5 years ago. Start now, and don't worry about the quality. Like you said about your videos, may have been awful to start with, but the more you do, the more you improve. And it's
Yeah,
just so important to start now and worry about getting perfect later down the line. It doesn't
yeah.
really matter.
Perfection will totally paralyze you. I'll never
Mm.
forget, in April, I had spent time editing this clip, and it was a story that I don't really talk a lot about. It was, when I'd been bullied when I was 12, and I said like, I think 30 times in this video. And I remember telling myself, you speak for a living. You can't put a video on the internet of you saying like 30 times. Like, you sound like an idiot. But I was like, dude, come on. You spent the time editing it, you spent the time captioning it. There's lots of other videos of you. Just put it out there. And the truth is, I think of all the videos I've posted on Facebook, I think I got a like for every time I said like in the video. Sometimes, perfection will paralyze us. And I
Mm.
think for my audience specifically, because most of my videos are so polished because I'm speaking, on a stage or in a class, I think my audience really liked the authenticity and vulnerability because nobody speaks like a speaker in everyday life. So don't let the way you sound or the way that your video looks keep you from playing the game, because as long as it inspires somebody, it educates them, or it moves them, you're good.
This is the entire thing. I think on that note, Rayna, thank you so much for your time today. You've been amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listen, guys, thanks for watching or listening to this episode, and I'll see you again real soon. Bye now.
Toodles.